Good morning, everyone, and welcome once again to Sunday School. We have begun a journey through the book of Proverbs that has been teaching us about discipline and wisdom, and we see how King Solomon is trying to prepare his son Rehoboam, as well as other men that are in the courts studying to be leaders, the ways of the Lord, and that wisdom is found in the ways of the Lord. And he began by telling us, first of all, that the fear of the Lord is what gives us the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge. Last week we walked through the first 12 verses of chapter 3, and today we're going to finish chapter 3, and we're going to begin in verse 21. I want to give you a little overview of verses 13 through 20 before we get to verse 21. Verse 13 through 20, he is telling us a little bit more about wisdom. As a matter of fact, he is describing wisdom as an elegant lady. And he says to his son, "Blessed or happy is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding." And then this is when he begins to describe her as an elegant lady. He said, "For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, her gain than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things you may desire cannot compare with her." No matter what you have on your mind, Rehoboam, nothing compares to knowing wisdom and having the wisdom of the Lord. And then he goes on to verse 16 to describe the length of days is in her right hand. In other words, when you follow the ways of wisdom, you can prolong your life. Or what really, how you could say that is, you won't die early, because foolishness can cause you to end your life early. But length of days is in her right hand, in her left hand riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who retain her. Now here's two interesting verses, verse 19 and 20, that kind of build us up, prepare us for where we're going to study today, which is in verses 21 through the end of the chapter. He said in verse 19, "The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens, and by his knowledge the depths were broken up, and clouds dropped down the dew." This one that I'm telling you, as Solomon is saying to his son, this one that I am telling you to trust and to seek his wisdom, to seek his guidance, understand it is his wisdom that created the earth. It is the wisdom of God that gave us what we see. It is the understanding of God that established the heavens, and his knowledge, by his knowledge, the depths were broken up and clouds dropped down the dew. This is the one, Solomon is saying to us, Solomon is saying to Rehoboam, this is the one who gives wisdom. The one who created the earth, the one who created the heavenlies, the one who broke up the depths and then allowed clouds to drop down the dew. This is the one that we seek wisdom from. This is the one we seek understanding from. This is the ways in which we walk, is the wisdom found in the Lord. So he begins verse 21 by saying, "My son, let them not depart from your eyes. Keep sound wisdom and discretion." The things that you see in God, this wisdom that we've learned from the Lord, don't ever get away from those. Don't let them depart from you. And then he uses two words, what are called the twin treasures, wisdom and discretion. Don't let them away from you. Don't let them depart from your eyes. In other words, keep your eyes focused on two things, wisdom and discretion. Now, wisdom would give useful insight about God's way to live. That's what wisdom does. It helps us understand this is how God wants us to live. Discretion would nourish good sense and sound judgment. And you can look at it this way. Wisdom is understanding the ways of God, how he wants us to live. Discretion is applying that to our senses and our judgments and how we live, how we act. So he said, "My son," and I like that in verse 21. It's really the heart of a father. It would be the heart of any parent who is trying to protect their children from making mistakes that possibly they have made. Parents, wouldn't that be a lot of the things we've done in our lives with our children, is trying to protect them and help them not make the same mistakes that we have made? And you could see some of that in this saying, "my son." It really is a father's heart as it would be a father or a mother's heart, trying to protect their kids. My son, don't let them depart from your eyes. Son, keep wisdom and discretion before you, because they are going to give you some wonderful things. And one of the things in this text from verse 21 through 26 that we see he gives them is confidence. He said there's some things you can be confident about when you walk in wisdom and discretion. He says, first of all, they shall be life. Verse 22, they shall be life unto your soul. The latter part of verse 22, and grace to your neck. So they will be life to your soul, grace to your neck. Life to your soul describes the inward vitality. You walk in wisdom, you walk in discretion. This will give you life on the inside. That's what he's describing for us. Walk in the ways of the Lord, walk in wisdom and discretion. It gives you life. There's an inward vitality that comes from walking in this way. And then he said it would be grace to your neck. And really what you could describe that as is like a beautiful necklace that someone wears. So life is the inward vitality. Grace is the outward beauty. So you walk in wisdom, you walk in discretion. There's life inside of you. It gives you vitality, gives you life. But then it's also evident to those who see you, who know you, that they see the grace on your life, this beautiful adornment on your life because of the way in which you live, the ways of wisdom and discretion that characterize your life. You probably right now could think of somebody that you have encountered or you have in contact with, whatever the case may be, and you might want to say of them, there's just something about them. They're wise. Man, they're fine people. You can just see in the way they live, and the way they talk, and the way they live, the decisions they make. They're fine, wise people. And that's really what he's describing here with life. The inward vitality gives you life. The grace about your neck, it will be known of you. It'll be a beautiful thing to see when people get to know you and recognize you're living your life in the ways of wisdom, in the ways of discretion, the ways of the Lord. And then he goes on to say some benefits. And again, it gives you confidence. He said that you should walk in the way of the Lord, and it produces for you safety. God's wisdom and his discretion for our life keeps us from stumbling on life's journey. It'll keep us from making terrible mistakes, from getting tripped up. And that's what he's describing in verse 23. You shall walk safely in your way, and your foot will not stumble. So it provides for us safety. That when you walk in the ways of wisdom, when you walk in the ways of discretion, he said it'll keep your foot from stumbling. It'll give you the ability to walk through life safely. Not only is it safety, it also gives you sleep, or really you could say rest. In verse 24, he said, when you lie down, you will not be afraid. So when you know you're walking in the ways of God, you're walking in his wisdom, and the decisions that you're making are the wisdom, come from the wisdom of God, the discretion that he gives you. He said, then you can go to sleep at night and you're not worried. You're not worried about what's going to happen tomorrow. You're not worried about your own safety. You don't have to worry. You can go to sleep and sleep in safety. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. Why? Because you're trusting in the one who created the heavens and the earth. You're trusting in the one who causes dew to fall upon the earth. You're trusting the one who created the heavenlies. He said, so what do you have to be afraid of? You're walking in his ways. You're walking in his wisdom. If he can take care of the earth, if he can create the earth, if he can create you, he can take care of you. So you can close your eyes and sleep and not be afraid. And then he follows that up to say, yes, you will lie down and your sleep will be sweet. Your sleep will be sweet. There's no anxiety. You see, weariness in our bodies says to us, hey, you need to rest. You need to go to bed. You need to lay your head down, go to sleep, get some rest. But anxiety in us says, hey, wake up. You can't sleep now because you got some stuff to figure out. There's anxiousness that comes about. And so, and that's what he's saying is, but when you trust in the Lord, when you go back to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, he shall direct your paths. If he's directing your paths, you're living your life according to his wisdom and discretion. He said, then you can go to sleep and you can have sweet sleep. You won't have to go to sleep being afraid, And you don't have to have anxiety waking you up saying, hey, you can't sleep now. You got to figure all this out. No, you can trust the Lord. You can trust the Lord. You can rest in Him. And He said, and your sleep will be sweet. And then He follows that up in verse 25 by saying, be not afraid of sudden fear. Or the New King James says, do not be afraid of sudden terror, nor of trouble from the wicked when it comes. He said, you don't have to worry about things that just suddenly erupt. We know a little bit about that, do we not? Since March, have we not seen a lot of stuff just, at least from our perspective, suddenly come upon us? The virus that has our nation shut down. And then we've had the riots and looting and all these things. Have they not just been in some way sudden to us? But you know what? When you walk in the ways of the Lord, when you walk in His wisdom, and when you trust in Him, He said, then you don't have to be afraid of sudden terror, nor of trouble from the wicked when it comes. He didn't say trouble from the wicked if it comes. He didn't say that, did He? He said, you don't have to be afraid of trouble from the wicked when it comes. And to me, the important part of that is the Lord saying to us, it's coming. Trouble from the wicked is going to come, but you don't have to be afraid. Verse 26, for the Lord will be your confidence, and He will keep your foot from being caught. You can have confidence in the Lord. And these things may arise, they may pop up, terror may come, wicked people may rise up and do wicked things, but you don't have to be afraid. Why? Because your confidence is in the Lord. Your trust is in Him, and understanding He will keep your foot from being caught. The picture here is of a snare, somebody who has set a trap for, say, a wild animal. And he's going to go on to describe some things that happen as interactions between humans and neighbors. But this picture is like one of a trap. He said, you don't have to worry when somebody is this sudden terror or somebody's trying to set a trap, because the Lord is your confidence. You can trust in Him. He will keep your foot from being caught. All right, so let's look then at verse 27 and 28. He said in verse 27, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in the power of your hand to do so. Do not say to your neighbor, go and come back, and tomorrow I will give it, when you have it with you. So really what he's saying here is, when you walk in the confidence of the Lord, when you trust in the Lord, you walk in wisdom and discretion. Not only does that give you safety, it gives you sleep, but it also affects how you treat others. It not only gives you a love for God, but it's a love for others. It affects how you deal with people. So he's describing here not only a confidence gained, but a kindness that is expressed in the wisdom of the Lord. He gives us here really 4 snapshots, if you will, of daily living. 4 things that really apply. You will see this in every walk of life, in every area of life. And so the first one is really taking from really employees, people who would work for you, or somebody you hire to come do work for you. And what he is describing here is in verse 27, do not withhold good from those to whom it is due. Now you have to understand, in the day in which they live, and really to some degree, and for a lot of people it is the same today, people would work and they got paid that day. A lot of times they get paid that day, and what I meant by it still applies today is a lot of times they needed it right now. That money, as soon as you give it to them, is going to be spent on their necessities, because this was how they made a living, and they had to work and be paid so they could eat, so they could take care of the things they need to take care of. You didn't find a lot of people in those days who had large savings accounts. Pretty much they worked and received their payment, and then they go and use that for food for the night, food for the next day. And what he is saying is you who walking with the Lord, your confidence is in the Lord and your trust is in the Lord, then there is a certain way you should act. Number one, you don't withhold from them to whom it is due. So somebody has worked for you, you pay them. Matter of fact, what you would find is that God's people would not fail to do what is right. That's really what he's saying here. If somebody has worked for you, you've hired them, you made a promise, you do this work, you will get this much, then you pay them. You take care of them. Only foolish employers would withhold and say, well, you'll have to come back. And I've heard stories like that, where an employer would say, come back next week and I'll give you everything. No, well, I'll tell you what, they give all kinds of excuses if you come back. And eventually, at least from the stories that I've heard, some of them never got a dime from the work. The work had been done, but their employer was not honest. And what he's saying to us is, you want to walk in the ways of wisdom, in discretion, and as living proof that your hope and your trust is in God, is that you have the money to pay what you've hired somebody to do. And when they're done, you pay them. You be faithful to do that, because that's what's right. It should never be said of a Christian employer that they do not take care of their employees. It should never be said of that. That's the first snapshot we see. We should never try to hold back from those that have earned the payment. We should never hold that back. The second picture involves a neighbor, and really you're going to see the neighbor theme kind of go along for the next couple of verses. He said in verse 28, say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I'll give when you have it right now. And there's a couple of pictures that could be created with that. It could be that the neighbor is the one who did the work for you. And he's saying, don't tell him that if he's completed a job, go away, come back tomorrow. When you have it right now, give it to him. Another picture that could be created is that your neighbor has come to you for asking for help. There's the picture of prayer in the New Testament that says when a neighbor comes to your door and bangs on your door and is saying, I have need of bread, and he said, you might not get up because he's your neighbor, but because he keeps knocking on the door, you might eventually get up. It's that same kind of picture. Your neighbor has a need, and he said, if your neighbor has a need and you have it to give, don't say, well, I tell you what, come back tomorrow and we'll talk about it. Obviously, if he's come, it's because he has a need. He said, if you have it and can give it, do so. Take care of those needs. The third snapshot you see continues to describe this neighborly process. In verse 29, he says, do not devise evil against your neighbor, for he dwells by you for safety's sake. Do not strive with a man without cause if he has done you no harm. Devise not evil against your neighbor, seeing that he dwells securely by you. So this idea of community, that you live in a neighborhood and you have the impression, and everyone has the impression, that you can trust your neighbors and that you live in a community that has come to trust each other. But what you don't realize is that maybe potentially one neighbor doesn't realize that their other neighbor has plans to harm them. He said, don't do that. Don't live like that. It's only foolish people who want to harm somebody, and we talked about that last week, ambush somebody for no reason, for no purpose, just to be mean, just to do something harmful and hateful. He said, you don't act like that. Godly people do not give into the notion that they can mistreat their neighbors. And they refuse to live like hypocrites who pretend to care for their neighbors and then carry out schemes to hurt them. But because we trust the Lord and because we want to walk in the ways of wisdom and discretion, we show kindness. And Jesus taught us who our neighbors are. And that was everybody you come in contact with. That you show kindness to everyone. The fourth snapshot that he gives us is verse 30. Strive not with a man without cause, if he has done no harm to you. There are two Old Testament pictures that give us the clarity on this verse. He said, don't strive with a man without a cause if he's done you no harm. In other words, don't cause trouble with him. Don't go after him. When he's not done you any harm, leave him alone. Be at peace. And we have two Old Testament examples of this. One is the story of Ahab, king of Israel, when he wanted Naboth's vineyard. But Naboth, because this was family land and really was against the law of the day that you can't sell the family land like that. That is your inheritance. This is what has been passed down from generation to generation. And really, legally, under the Old Testament law, you're not allowed to sell that. And so, number one, it was wrong for Ahab to even want it, to ask for it. It was right of Naboth to say, I couldn't do that. I couldn't sell you my land. Of course, you probably know the story. Jezebel, Ahab's wife, she come up with a wicked plan, wrote some letters, had Naboth killed so that Ahab could go and take over the vineyard. He strove with his neighbor without a cause. Naboth had not done anything to the king. As a matter of fact, Naboth was the righteous one to say, it would be wrong of me to sell you this, my family's property. This is what belongs to my future family. This is what has belonged to my past family, and it would be wrong of me to do that. The second example you may see, or you would see, is that generations later, in Esther chapter 5, a member of Israel's royal court named Haman was wanting to murder a good man named Mordecai. And he came up with an evil plot that would have had him executed. Now, if you know the story in Esther, you find out that Haman wound up being the one executed on the gallows he had built for Mordecai. But he was striving with Mordecai. He was going against him, and he had no cause. Mordecai had not done anything to him. But it was somebody he went after. And so all of these really are talking about how we interact with people. That is, people who trust the Lord, people who walk with God, that there are certain ways we act. Because as we walk in wisdom and discretion, here are just 4 snapshots that we don't withhold. If we're an employer, we pay people. Or if not an employer, in the sense that you just may hire somebody to come cut your grass. Pay them. You take care of those things. That's what a wise person representing the Lord would do. You don't devise evil plans against your neighbors. If a neighbor comes and asks for your help or is in need, and you have the ability to meet the need, don't tell him to go away and come back. Don't plot against the neighbor, and certainly don't strive with a person and you have no cause to. Don't go after that. So that is the overflow, the expression of wisdom and discretion in our lives as we walk in the ways of the Lord. All right, so let's move to the last part of this chapter. We see the blessings. There is a confidence that comes from walking the ways of God. There's a kindness that is shown in response to walking in the ways and the wisdom and discretion of the Lord. But then there's a blessing. There's a blessing that is secured when we walk in the wisdom of the Lord. In verse 31, he said, "Do not envy the oppressor and choose none of his ways. For the perverse person is an abomination to the Lord, but his secret counsel is with the upright." So the first thing he says to them, Solomon's already warned Rehoboam, he's already warned us in this text about the temptation to take the path of the oppressor. And what he's describing here, and you can see that again from chapter 2, verses 12 through 15, that if you follow the ways of a violent man, then what you might be tempted to see is that, boy, he gets what he wants. He has all this wealth. He didn't have to work hard for it. He got rich quick. And he lives this lavish lifestyle. But obviously what that means is if you're going to follow if you're going to have what he has, you're going to follow his ways. You're going to have to follow this criminal activity. He said, choose instead to follow God's wisdom. Ignore the example set by those who do not follow God's ways, who walk in foolish ways. Ignore those. He said, in other words, the way he wrote the text was, do not envy the oppressor. Don't wish you could be like him. And choose none of his ways. Don't follow in any of his ways. That's foolishness. And he gives the reason why in verse 32. For the King James uses the word, for the froward is abomination to the Lord. New King James uses the phrase, the perverse person is an abomination to the Lord. And it's something we find in the text. Matter of fact, there have been people, even in Scripture, who have said, it sure looks like the wicked get away with everything. It sure looks like wicked people have no justice, no day in court. They seem to get away with everything. Matter of fact, Psalm 73 is a psalm by Asaph, and it seemed to be what he was saying in the first part of the psalm, that it just seems like the wicked can do whatever they want to do and they get away from it. But then it describes how his perspective changed when he went to the temple, when he went to worship. And suddenly he could see through the eyes of the Lord, that God allowed him to see through his own eyes, that from God's perspective, they're an abomination. In other words, they repulse me. Their lifestyle repulses me, makes me sick. I'm disgusted with them. But on the other hand, the Lord looks upon the righteous in a different way. And I love this verse. I love this verse. He said, but his secret, the Lord's secret is with the righteous. And I like how the New King James actually says that. Verse 32, the Lord detests a perverse man, but takes the upright into his confidence. I like the way he expresses that, and that he is disgusted with the perverse ways. He is angry with them, with the foolishness of those people. But for the righteous who want to walk in the ways of God, he considers them to be his friends. He takes them into his confidence. They're his friends. Verse 33, the curse of the Lord is in the house of the wicked, but he blesses the habitation of the just. And again, just continuing on with the blessing. Verse 33, the curse of the Lord is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the just. And then the last two verses that we're going to look at today, verse 34 and 35. Surely he scorns the scornful, but gives grace to the humble. The wise shall inherit glory, but shame shall be the legacy of fools. You know what it boils down to? It may look now like the unjust and the wicked are getting away with everything. But there's coming a day. He says you can rest assured there's going to be a blessing on your life for following the ways of God. God's going to bless that. He will not bless. Matter of fact, he will have a curse on those who live in foolish ways and unjust ways. But there's coming a day. And that God gives grace to the humble. See, God gives grace to people who understand, Lord, I cannot do it on my own. I need you. I need your wisdom. I need your help. I need you to do it through me because I'm incapable of my own. I don't have any ways of my own that'll work. I need your ways. Foolish people say, I got this. I can handle it. I'll do what I want to do. You're not going to tell me what to do. Isn't that the generation we're living in today? You're not going to tell me what to do. You're not going to put any restrictions on me. It's my life. I'll do what I want to. That's foolishness. That is not walking in the ways of wisdom, in the ways of the Lord, or in the ways of discretion. It's almost like, he said, surely he scorns the scorners, but he gives grace to the humble. And literally what he's saying is, he scorns the scorners. For those who say, I don't want your ways, that there may come a day where they look for the ways of God, and God's ways are already past finding out. They're laughing at his commands, but the one thing the psalmist tells us, God is the one who gets the last laugh. You'll laugh now, but you will bow later. Now, do we wish that on anybody? Absolutely not. But neither do we need to sit around going, look at everybody who's living wicked. They can just get away with whatever they want to do. They can do what they want to do, and it doesn't even matter. Understand this. Get your eyes off them. God will take care of them. You walk in the ways of wisdom. Why? Because the wise shall inherit glory, or a place of honor. And being wise means trusting the Lord to give us his wisdom so we can apply it to our lives. And we'll have a place of honor in the Lord to walk in his wisdom. He said, but fools, they shall be put to shame. They will come to shame. So let us walk in the ways of the Lord. It'll give us confidence in our lives. It'll give us kindness in our expressions. And we'll secure blessings for our lives. So that is Proverbs chapter 3. Next Sunday, we'll start with chapter 4. God bless you. Hope to see you in services in a little while. And I hope you have a great week.